I think we should start because, well, we have a very dense agenda and we want to really go through all the items. So first of all, I would like to thank all the people who were interested about this event, this webinar. We organized it because today we celebrate the observance of the International Day of Biodiversity. So we wanted to organize this webinar on soil biodiversity as a contribution to the whole biodiversity per se. We have a very intense agenda today, and we have more than 2,300 people registered, but now we have connected 850. So I'm sure more people will be joining, but we need to start. So as many of the participants are aware, we planned a global symposium on soil biodiversity in March, then we postponed it till June, and now it's postponed till February. But we thought it will be important to keep the momentum on soil biodiversity, and I think this is a great opportunity because of the observance of these days to have this webinar, but to me it's like the small symposium that we planned because we are basically representing the agenda as it was. So I'm very glad for this. And I want to thank all the panelists who will be speaking today. We have Ms. Maria Elena Semedo, Deputy Director General from FAO here. We have His Excellency Mohamed Hussein Emadi, who is the permanent representative of Iran to FAO and chair of the Committee of Agriculture. We have Mr. David Cooper, who's the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Convention of Biological Diversity, Mr. Eduardo Mansour, who's the Director of the Land and Water Division, and we have three speakers who are Dr. Daphne Miller from the University of California and Professor Wim van den Putten from the Netherlands Institute of Ecology, and Ms. Monica Kobayashi, who's from our group in FAO. So I think we will start directly. We will have three sessions here. One will be the opening for setting the scene, and you see how science can be transformed into policies, conventions, UN, etc. Then we will have three series of presentations, and hopefully we will have a discussion. In order to make this interactive, we will launch two polls after each of the presentations in order to see your opinion about some concrete aspects. You can feel free to write any question on the chat because we will try to answer now, but most likely we will answer after the event and you will get the answers with a report. So please feel free to use this chat. Without further delay, I will invite Ms. Maria Elena Semedo, who's our Deputy Director General for Climate and Natural Resources in FAO, to kindly open this event. Ms. Semedo, please.
Thank you, Ronald. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. I see we have more than 1,000 people connected. Welcome to this webinar on soil biodiversity. Ambassador Emadi, very good to see you. David Cooper, thank you for joining us and good to see you. Dear panelists, dear participants, today we celebrate the International Day for Biological Diversity. Happy International Day to all of you. And as you know, the theme is our solutions are in nature. And this morning we launched the SOFO, and the theme was forest and biodiversity. And one of the conclusions were that we need to change the way we connect with nature, that we need healthy soils for a healthy planet with vibrant ecosystems that allow our food system to be more resilient. And these invisible organisms we'll be talking about later, they play a crucial role in sustaining our planet, providing our food, supporting our health, our ways of living, and also our well-being. And thanks to the Global Soil Partnership, which is focusing its annual campaign on soil biodiversity with the theme, Keep Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity. It is all linked to the theme of our International Day on Biodiversity. And we all know that while soils are a major reservoir of global biodiversity, the loss of soil biodiversity is one of the major threats soil threats in many regions. And the landmark FAO State of Biodiversity for Food and Agriculture, the first ever, launched last year, highlighted that associated biodiversity species living in around production systems, particularly microorganisms and invertebrates, has never been documented. We need better and more data. In many cases, there is a limited understanding of ecosystem function and service, and consequently, the contribution of specific biodiversity components to the production systems are poorly understood. And if you're really thinking about resilient food systems, we need to better understand the complexity of the interaction regarding the all elements of our nature and of our soils. We have been working on the preparation of a global assessment on the status of soil biodiversity and the organization of the Global Symposium on Soil Biodiversity. As it has been said, unfortunately we had to postpone, but I hope very soon we'll be able to organize and to come up with very sound and clear recommendation. This year it was also called a super year for nature. We had planned to organize several meetings. They have all been postponed, but it doesn't mean that the importance of nature and the importance of protecting nature is more than ever important to us as we are dealing with COVID and post-COVID, how we can build back better and how we can integrate it, nature in all the solutions will be coming for the post-COVID. Indeed, as I said, let's not forget that our solutions are in nature for helping us to achieve the aspiration of the 2030 Sustainable Development. And FAO is very much committed to work with the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have been very strong and valuable partners to steer and scale up the action needed to mainstream biodiversity across all the agriculture sectors. The interconnection among all the agriculture sectors are fundamental to preserve and to conserve our biodiversity and to produce enough food without destroying the planet. In this way, this webinar is an excellent opportunity for us to discuss together what is soil biodiversity, why it is so important, and what actions are needed to build together a more sustainable world. In a world affected by COVID-19 pandemic, the need to learn more and understand microbiodiversity becomes ever more essential to sustainable agriculture, to build healthier, more equitable and a safer world. And I think this is what we all need to contribute, and we need bold actions and policies for that. I look forward to learning your recommendations to move forward and wish you a fruitful webinar. Again, happy International Biodiversity Day. I look forward to your recommendation and your discussions. Thank you again for joining us today. And let me see, we have more than 1,000 participants. It has been a success so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Semedo. It is clear that you make it clear that FAO is committed to nature and to protect biodiversity. So that is something that we need to highlight and appreciate when we are talking about food security. Now, I will invite His Excellency, the Ambassador Emadi, who will kindly provide us also opening remarks. He is the permanent representative of Iran to FAO, but also he chairs the Committee on agriculture, which is a very important technical brand of FAO. Please, Ambassador Madi.
Yes, can you hear me? Good afternoon, and thank you very much for actually arranging such a meeting. And this is the best way that we can use actually the and change the danger to opportunity in time of COVID-19. And I think having about 1,000 sort of audience showing that how we as a human being with the smartness, with correlation and cooperation can actually beat coronavirus by using the digital world. As mentioned by my colleagues, Madam Elena Semedo, this is actually biological. Today is a Biodiversity Day, and we celebrate it. In our sort of COAG, we do believe on, and one of our job that we do is actually deciding about days and years and so on. And every time we are facing with such a huge amount of sort of demand, and now we can see that how it's the impact of that. The honeybee day, and today is tea day yesterday, and of course today is the day of biological biodiversity. The philosophy of these days actually once again show us that is how it is necessary, because we do believe in our culture the name of human being is insan in Arabic and Farsi. Insan means a person which forget. The most important actually indicator of human being is to forgetting and to actually forget the importance of things for him. That's why we need some reminder, and this type of days, years and so on are the best reminder for us to understand what is important for us and to appreciate it in our daily life. Of course, biodiversity is one of them. As we know, the issue and the concept of biodiversity is not so old. It's about 60 years. Just 60 years ago, actually the issue of the biodiversity was merged by some ecological and some scientists, and then now become as one of the most important issues and the threat that the human being is facing with. And now we understand that how it is important and how we are actually damaging the biodiversity by our way of life and doing. And now we can see that how sometimes nature punish us for forgiving and forgetting some important things like health, One Health, and also biodiversity, and locked down us for almost 3 to 4 months inside of the house and put us in the jail because of forgetting the importance role of some factors in our daily life, which is the nature. And when we say nature-based solution, it's again showing that how nature have its own principle and its own sort of fundamental right. And of course, when something happens, they have their own defensive system, which somebody believed that the coronavirus is a defensive system of Earth against human being and against people that have done a lot of wrong things with the planet. Of course, the soil biodiversity is one of the area. I, as an agriculturalist, when I remember I started my bachelor 40 years ago, everything is what about the soil was physical and chemical things about the soil. And we all focusing on physical part and chemical part of the soil. And then when I started my master, I understood that biological part of the soil also is getting important. And somebody and some of the professors are talking about biological part of that. And when ecology, which focusing on eco, not focusing on parts, but focusing on the connection and relation and system thinking actually come to the way of looking at the world, particularly with the biodiversity, showing that how the role of soil biodiversity is much more important than even the chemical, physical, and even biological part of the soil. And I'm very happy that this issue become under the sort of focus of FAO and of course the scientists, that the potential role of soil is not just for food production and food productivity, but more important is about the environmental services and about the health of planet and how the microorganisms in the soil play a very, very critical role. And unfortunately, as it was mentioned by Madam Semedo, most of the cases have not been explored so far. The knowledge that we have about the soil biodiversity and soil mechanism biodiversity is really near to nothing compared to the whole complexity that we have and the diversity that we have in all parts of the world and the sort of ecosystem that we have. That's why we need to remember, we need to focus on the hidden part of the issue that we are facing. The German philosopher Habermas had a very important word when Corona happened. He said that the most important role of Corona to us was not actually punishing us or not a health issue, was and even not an ontological part of the human being, but epistemological part. It shows to us how we are actually unaware about the situation and how our epistemology is very, very limited to the reality and so on and so forth. That was a big shock to human being, that we know something and we don't know a lot of things. And I think we are faced with the same issue with the soil biodiversity that we are facing, with a huge amount of potential and danger. And actually knowing more about the biodiversity of soil is very, very important. And today I think the whole discussion would be a good learning process, at least for me as a student of the agriculture. And of course, the most important role of the soil in the environmental services, particularly on carbon fixation, on all other matter, and of course, resilience against the microorganism system and so on and so forth. That's why I take it as an opportunity, as a learning sort of opportunity today to learn and to educate by my colleagues more about the soil biodiversity. And thank you again, FAO, to highlighting and put the light on the other dark spots of the knowledge of human being and us as a sort of people who work in the field of agriculture. Thank you again, Eduardo. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think this was a very excellent remark on how you make the connections, not only in time from where biodiversity comes from, but also how it's important to see and go into the details, including knowing our soils for food production. So thanks a lot. I'm sure Eduardo will have a lot of work because he will be making the conclusions of the webinar. So there will be many inputs for him. Thanks again. Now I will invite Mr. David Cooper, who's the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Convention of Biological Diversity. I'm sure he has a lot to tell us from that side where they really have biodiversity as the core mandate. David, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Ronald, and many thanks to Maria Elena, to Eduardo, and to everyone at FAO for this initiative. And thanks to Ambassador Emadi for all his support to mainstreaming biodiversity in the work at FAO, not letting us forget about the importance of biodiversity. I'd like to give you all, on behalf of the Secretariat of the Convention, best wishes for this International Day for Biodiversity. I'm very pleased to see so many people involved in this webinar. We'd also like to express our sincere appreciation to FAO and to all the experts involved in the preparation of the report on soil biodiversity. This responds to a request from the CBD COP, the Conference of the Parties, and in fact soil biodiversity will be a major theme for discussion at the Convention's scientific body later this year. And of course, this initiative is also very timely as we prepare for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework that will be adopted now next year at COP15 in Kunming, China. As others have said, this ongoing pandemic gives us a time to reflect, and it really demonstrates how our fate is inextricably linked to that of the natural world. Diseases, emerging diseases like COVID, are kept in check by resilient ecosystems and diverse species. As we begin to build back better from the impacts of the pandemic, as Ambassador Emadi said, a One Health approach will be essential. But this must be an approach that's really inclusive of biodiversity and takes into account all the links between biodiversity and human wealth, including the links between the health between biodiversity and the health of our agricultural systems. And of course, as we will hear from Wim, from Daphne and Monica, soil biodiversity is key to this. And usually unseen and unappreciated, it's in fact essential to supporting our food, our health, and many other of nature's contributions to people. it's important in the fight against climate change. And so, indeed, solutions are in our nature, and soil biodiversity is a key part of this nature. Thank you all very much again for organizing this event. Thank you for all of those that are participating in it. I look forward to an exciting webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. I think you make it very clear. We need to demonstrate, you already said, but today we would like to demonstrate together that soil biodiversity can be a nature-based solution. So let's see. And for that, of course, we have two keynote presentations and one presentation from FAO that we show where are we on the topic of soil biodiversity. Time is running, of course, and I want to tell you that we have 1,111 participants so far, and we have 146 countries represented, which is, of course, a very good indication on the importance of this topic. Without further delay, I would like to invite Professor Wim van der Putten from the Netherlands Institute of Ecology, who will try to convince us with scientific evidence that soil biodiversity is a nature-based solution. Wim, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And let's see. I hope that my screen is visible now. Yes? Okay. Well, first, I'm deeply impressed. I see the chats and see people from Mexico, Cameroon, Nepal, almost every country in the world so coming together during this webinar. And I was given the challenge to speak about soil biodiversity as a nature-based solution. So my first question was, a solution for what? And then I thought, so how are we benefiting from soil? And actually everything that we eat and drink every day, and what we breathe, the clothes that we wear, everything that and construction materials, they all pass through the soil and the soil biodiversity over and over again. So when I start to fill in the question, I come to the question, is soil biodiversity a solution for sustainability? So if you look at the sustainability development goals, the sustainable development goals, then I've marked in blue which of the SDGs are affected by soil. So number 2, 3, good health, clean water, renewable energy. Almost half of the sustainable development goals is being affected by soil. And so it's not strange that the United Nations in 2015 declared the year to the as the International Year of Soils. And as has been explained in the introduction already, it's also not strange that the United Nations has asked FAO and the Global Soil Partnership to carry out the first global soil biodiversity assessment, which is now in progress. And so because soil is so important, and on the one hand, there is a lot to discover, and on the other hand, we know quite a bit already. So I will take you with me through the way how I look at this issue. Well, to start with soil biodiversity. So today is Biodiversity Day, and we always have to compete with people working on plants, for example. Well, the Netherlands is a small country, and we have about 1,400 species of wild plants. But if you take one handful of soil, you have over 5,000 species. The species concept is a bit difficult, so I should say taxa of microbes already in one handful of soil. So this is 3 times more the diversity of wild plant species in the Netherlands. And it's not for nothing that the saying is that soil and soil biodiversity is the tropical rainforest for the poor man. In these days, we are all poor people because we cannot travel. And so if you really want to enjoy biodiversity, then take a handful of soil and you know that you're looking at something which is massive. And this one handful of soil has more individuals in it than there are humans on Earth. So this is really, it's amazing, it's dazzling. So it's not only microbes. Here you see a cartoon where there is, in the top left, there is microbes, mycorrhizal fungi, bacteria, but there's also a lot of other life in soil, including nematodes, tardigrades, collembolans, mites, and then other soil organisms, earthworms, up to moles. And the size differences are enormous. So the smallest organism is about 2 microns, and a mole is about 20 centimeters. So this is also, these dimensions that we are working with is really huge. So is soil biodiversity a solution for sustainability, and can we learn from nature? My take-home message is yes, but, and this will complicate the filling out of your questionnaire later on. So yes, soil biodiversity is important, but we have to think beyond numbers only. It's not only about 5,000 species of microbes in one handful of soil. We also have to look at what they are doing and how they are interacting with other species. And sometimes I'm being approached by someone who says, can you give me some soil biodiversity because I want to improve my land? Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, because then you also have to think about what is making that this land now has less soil biodiversity. So if you want to restore soil biodiversity, you also have to think about ecosystem management. First, about soil biodiversity and its multifunctionality. So here you see a landscape where you have soil organisms that contribute to the sequestration of carbon, to the fixation of nitrogen, to the control of plant parasitic nematodes, but also to the development of antibiotic resistance, or the breakdown of waste, or the buildup of soil organic matter. So soil biodiversity is very multifunctional and contributing to many ecosystem services. And also soil biota differ in activities across space and across time. And for example, a spatial dimension that has been published about is displayed on this map, this global map. Here you see the numbers of nematodes per 100 grams of soil. And this is a study which has been pulled by Johan van der Hoge and Stefan Gijssen. And this was published last year. And to our surprise, the highest numbers of nematodes were present in the Arctic areas, so in the peat areas, and in the high mountain ranges. So where it is cold, wet, and where there's a lot of organic matter. While the tropical rainforests, where we know that there's a lot of plant species diversity and insect diversity, there we have relatively fewer nematodes present. So if you would make this map for termites, it would look completely different, or for ants, or for earthworms. So this is very important to realize, that the distribution of soil biodiversity varies across space, and this distribution may differ among groups of soil biota. So what is a key problem? At this moment, everybody is shocked by the insect decline that has been published about. But actually, before that was known, we already knew that intensification of agricultural production has a dramatic effect on soil biodiversity. So this is a study done in 4 European countries: Sweden, the United Kingdom, Czech Republic, and Greece. And although we have a lot of different opinions in Europe about how to solve everything, there's very much agreement about the soil biodiversity in relation to land use intensification. So this is grassland extensive agriculture, intensive agriculture in Sweden, and it looks the same like in the UK, in the Czech Republic, and in Greece. It all goes down, And if you, that is this independent, whether you look at the number of functional groups or the diversity based on Shannon index or the average trophic levels. So intensification of agriculture leads to a loss of soil biodiversity. So can we then restore soil biodiversity? Yes, we can. We know that if you abandon agricultural land, then over time, and that might take, decades, 30 years or more, but over time, soil biodiversity will become restored. And here I want to demonstrate that you not only should look at the numbers of species, but also at the way how they interact. Because if you look at recently abandoned fields, and if you plot all the soil biodiversity on this circle, here in red are the bacteria, there are the fungi, the fungivores, the bacterivores, the plant feeders, the plants themselves, they are also soil organisms. And if you then look at their correlatedness, then you see that they are very poorly correlated in recently abandoned fields. While in midterm abandoned fields, you see more green, more dense green lines between the different groups. So there the network interaction strength is increasing. And this is really important because when we studied the functional consequences of this soil biodiversity development, then we could demonstrate that in these midterm fields, the carbon storage in soil is much more efficient and the nitrogen use is much more efficient than in these recently abandoned fields with an open network. Also, the pathogen suppression is much more efficient in these midterm abandoned fields. So, yes, we can restore soil biodiversity, for example, by abandoning land. And then it's also important to note that you also change the structure of the soil community. So to resume, in nature, structure, and you have later succession stages with a closed, dense network structure with much more efficient soils. So, what can we do in agriculture to get this type of result? Well, for example, we can go for reduced tillage, we can go for soil organic matter increase, cover crops, fewer pesticides, etc. But then we have one problem, and this is something that we need to solve. In nature and also in agriculture, we have high productivity on these open network soils. So soils with less biodiversity, open networks, they have more productivity than soils with closed networks. So in nature, slow-growing plants are growing in these sites, and they are capable of taking out the nutrients in an efficient way. So the challenge for a more nature-based approach is to find plant species or plant traits and bring that into crops, which help these crops to extract the nutrients in a much more efficient way from these high diversity soil systems. So the point is that you should not only increase soil biodiversity, but also that you have to talk to crop breeders and agronomists in order to get the right crop species and crop strains to grow on these biodiverse soils. So at this moment, there are several lines that are being explored. One is to go back to the wild relatives of crops and see what we can learn from them. And the other approach is to study wild plant species along successional gradients and to learn from the blueprint of plants and see what we can learn from that to make crops more capable of growing in high diversity soils. So this is my conclusions. Considering soil biodiversity also requires considering traits and interactions and network structure, and soil biodiversity as a nature-based solution is sort of comparable to that it takes two to tango. You not only need to change the soil, but also you should have the right crop to go with that soil. So that's my presentation, and then I want to finish with, if you want to have some reading to be done, then there's the nice atlases that can be read. There's very soon we will get the first global soil biodiversity assessment. There's citizen science projects, there's policy reports, and if you're interested, you can register at the website of the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative. That's for free, and you can become a member, and we will keep you updated So thank you very much. And this was it.
Thank you very much, Wim. I think it was a very interesting presentation, bringing a lot of new information, I'm sure, for many people. I'm sure Eduardo is taking notes, and I see the chat full of questions. And look, we would like this to make it very interactive, but we will not make it in 1 hour. I'm sure about that. And more people keep joining. So I will keep those questions for the last, and we will try to address some of them. If not, we will send written responses. So we will work with the presenters on that. I would like to launch 2 polls after Wim's presentation. Of course, they are not having those considerations that he pointed out, but I think it will be good to have your opinion about it. So the first poll will come soon, and please feel free to respond. Do you consider soil biodiversity as a nature-based solution to global challenges such as human health, food production, climate change, soil pollution, and land degradation? That's the question. So please let us know if you really think that this is the case. People are voting, so that's good. We have 1,136 participants. Well, 37 now. Let's give the chance for all to vote. Okay, so we have 78% of people who voted, and we can say that 98% agreed that soil biodiversity can be considered a nature-based solution for all these global issues that we talk. But of course, there is always the challenge that comes with the details as Wim showed it to us, right? It's not only the number of species, but we need to know the functions, the interactions with other species, the environment, etc. So it's not that easy. Now we have a second poll. It will come soon. What are the main applications of soil biodiversity in your country? We want to know from you. I know that we saw the list of participants, and many coming from the academia, also from governments, etc. But we want to see if soil biodiversity is really addressed by governments, the academia only, or what? And how these sectors are applying soil biodiversity, either in crop production, maybe in pollution bioremediation, the medical sector, food processing, or ecosystem restoration. So you saw the examples from Wim. So we would like to see what is the main sector in which soil biodiversity is applied in your country. Okay, thank you very much. We have around 72% of the people who voted. And yes, people say that the majority in their countries, and as I said before, we have more than 140 countries represented in this webinar. And most of people said that soil biodiversity is applied especially in crop production. Then we have ecosystem restoration, pollution bioremediation, some in food processing, and very few in terms of medical sector, and while others indicated none or others. So this gives us very good information for all of us, because when you see the report of the webinar, you will see why we asked these questions. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Daphne Miller from the University of California, who will give us another angle in terms of soil biodiversity. And as you saw in the poll, the medical sector, human health is not really prominent in countries when talking about soil biodiversity is mainly focused on crop production. But then Daphne will show us what soil biodiversity also can do in terms of human health, which is a very important topic nowadays with this pandemic. Daphne, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. And I want to say that it is such a pleasure to be here as early as it is and to be with all of you from all over the world. And thank you, FAO, for inviting me to join. And I was especially pleased to see a lot of people from the United States signing on as well, and to send the message that we are very much there with you internationally, and it is only as we can all work together in these organizations that we can do things like save soil. And so I'm very, very honored to work with all of you. Let me try and share my screen here. Oh boy. No, that is not it. I might need to call my technician in here for share content, and then I do. Okay, here we are. So I am a family physician, and in fact, I spend a lot of my day in a room that looks like this, so a little bit different from a lot of you. But even here, doing this work, yes?
Excuse me, we cannot see your presentation yet.
You cannot see it yet?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I can ask Isabel to launch it, because we have a copy of it if you have problems.
Okay, one second here.
Okay, I think
you
Isabel
can see it now?
Someone else is sharing.
Yeah, but Isabel now shared it and put the slide, so she will navigate for you. Is that okay?
Okay, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, you just tell her when to change, okay? You say okay.
Okay, that sounds good, and I can track along here. Okay, so in terms of the next slide, please. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of grounding in where I spend a bunch of my day. Is actually in a clinical room taking care of patients. And next slide, please. I actually, not too long ago, during the height of the pandemic here in San Francisco, saw a patient who, interestingly enough, was actually really hoping that they were infected with at least 3 viruses. And the story here is that they went somewhere where it was very cold and fell on the ice and broke their hip, and needed a hip replacement as a result of it, and got the steel in there, and then got a terrible infection, an invasive infection in their hip. And the doctors tried to treat it with antibiotics, and one antibiotic after another. And unfortunately, it was resistant. It was a multi-drug resistant infection. And the patient is now barely, the infection is barely being managed, but they can't seem to cure it at all. And the doctors were actually telling the patient that the only thing that could be done was to amputate the hip, until some very creative physician stepped in and said that, you know what, we are going to actually start to work with the ecology of this infection, and we're going to actually start to understand what's going on in there. And with this aggressive, next slide, with this aggressive bacteria, next slide. With these aggressive bacteria, there happened to also be a whole ecosystem in that hip, including kind of helpful viruses that are called bacteriophages that actually eat the bacteria, and what they or attack the bacteria very precisely. And so they're actually identifying these viruses, these bacteriophages, and plating them out and using them as very targeted antibiotics to attack this infection and saving this person's hip. Now, this kind of ecosystem approach is something that is very novel for us to think about in a way in medicine, where we tend to use chemistry over biology. And next slide, please. Here, that's a picture of the bacteriophage. And what's so interesting is that they actually need to find several of those bacteriophages because they actually all work together in concert. And this, for me, is what I call a win-win solution, because it obviously is going to help this patient, but is also helping our ecosystem with antibiotic-resistant genes and these genes that flow between hospitals and our own bodies and the soil and so on. And these are the kind of win-win solutions that we actually need to start to look for in general. Next slide. Now, the same story that I just told you about this patient's hip, does that sound familiar to you in a way? And it does very much, because in fact, that is the same thing that's been happening with our soils for so many years. Next slide. We are in this vicious cycle where we have been using different kinds of sides, and I will explain what those sides are. They aren't just just the antibiotics, for sure. They're pesticides, and I will show you some other examples. But what they do is they create biodiversity loss, and biodiversity loss in turn creates resistance to whatever the chemical is that you're using, and then you're off to the races, just like you were in that patient's hip that I just told you about. Next slide. And these sides are everything from herbicides and pesticides. Next slide. But there are also things like plowing, which destroy the mycorrhizal fungi and these important structures in the soil that we just heard about that really are the functional groups within that soil. Next slide. And in terms of biodiversity loss, this is what we're seeing is not just intensive agriculture, but this monoculture, just the loss of genetics, both in our crops, next slide, and in our livestock. All these chickens are probably related in some way. One progenitor hen gives you, 30 million of these hens. So, we're losing our genetics in our plants and in our livestock. Next slide. So enlisting biodiversity in soil to have this win-win situation that keeps us healthy and that keeps soil healthy. Here are some really interesting examples of farmers who are thinking just like those doctors I just told you about, who are using bacteriophages to treat the antibiotic resistance. Next slide. By the way, I call this intelligent tinkering, the sort of Aldo Leopold term. But these are farmers in Oklahoma, and I don't know if you know anything about Oklahoma, but it really has some of the most unproductive soil in the United States. It was the location of the Great Dust Bowl, and where they lost so much soil. And these are two farmers who are farming there, and they are bringing back functional biodiversity in their soil with cover cropping. These are the almonds. Next slide. Next slide. But they are also doing something that is really quite radical, in that not only are they growing cover crops, but they're actually growing cover crops that are edible. So they have a whole mixture of edible seeds in them. And these are nourishing the soil, but this is also a very nutrient insecure part of the United States where they get plenty of calories. We have high rates of obesity and heart disease and diabetes there, but very low access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And what they're doing is harvesting their cover crops, and these are grown in between the corn and the soy and a lot of their more commodity crops, and these are going to the local community. So a really interesting example of win-win, where they're feeding the soil, diversifying in terms of the seeds, and also feeding the community. And really one of the first examples I've heard of these kind of edible cover crops, very much in the kind of three sister style that we do all over the world with the corn and squash and beans. Next slide. These are the kitchenistas in San Diego. They're urban farmers who are doing a diabetes prevention program that is soil-based, where they're educating low-income, low-access communities not only how to grow their own food in urban areas, but then how to cook it. So another soil-based solution that is win-win. Next slide. This is Juggy Samran, a colleague of mine who's a psychiatrist at the VA in California. And he is an almond farmer as well. And he is actually exploring the connection between healthy soil and mental health. And there's actually a rich literature coming out there on how certain microorganisms actually affect our mood and the way we think and so on. And he's also doing cover crops in between his tree crops, which is quite a novel approach. So once again, another full circle win-win. Next slide. This is a farmer in the Ozarks in Missouri who's does planned grazing or rotational grazing, and has himself discovered that using this form of grazing has brought his soil back to life, has improved the water table. But what is so interesting to me about this is he's also found that it's made his cattle much healthier. And there's a lot of research now showing that the same exposure to healthy livestock is very good for children, and it decreases incidence of asthma and so on. And they're finding that certainly for children who are being raised on farms, but the same researchers who are located in Europe, and I put one of their latest studies up there on the screen, are finding that even in urban areas, if they can imitate the microbiota that are found on these healthy farms, that it prevents or lowers the incidence of asthma and can be immune modulating. Next step. And this is a farmer in Montana who has massive riparian ways next to his fields. And what we're finding is that these buffer zones are so important for preventing spillover and invasion from dangerous and infectious organisms, such as we are seeing with COVID-19. So I actually see this style of agriculture as being pandemic prevention by growing these wild areas or riparian ways so that we have less interface with spillover from nature. Next slide. And finally, this is a farmer, I love to show this, who has a hoop house in New Hampshire, and we're realizing that his weeds were taking over the hoop house. So next slide. He actually started to sell the weeds. These were chickweed at the local farmer's market, and as you can see, he was getting $24 a pound in New York City for these weeds. And so entrepreneurship also being a very important part of health and human health. And also these weeds are very rich in antioxidants. So next slide. So there you have it. These farmers who are doing these win-win approaches are doing everything both for soil health and for the health of our own bodies. They're keeping the soil covered. Next. They're allowing for plant diversity. Next. They're integrating livestock. Next. They have a minimal disturbance of the soil, and the disturbance being everything from plowing to pesticides to monocropping. They're avoiding that. Next step. And finally, all of that gives you health. Next. So in closing, I want to invite all of you from all around the world to become health ambassadors as you work with the soil. Next. To do this, you are going to need a kit, a health ambassador kit. And in that kit, next, you're going to need a package of cotton underwear. Next. This is the Soil Your Undies test. How many of you have done that? I don't know. We'll see in the response later. But what you're going to do is you're going to take those underwear and you're going to plant them an inch or two, maybe 3 or 4 inches. Take one pair and put it under very healthy biodiverse soil, and the other pair you're going to put it under soil that is not healthy at all. And you're going to leave them there for a couple months. And then you're going to dig them up and you're going to see the difference, and you're going to see what the microbes have done to that cellulose in those underwear. I should add that you should wash the underwear first to get any chemicals out of it. And this is how you're going to demonstrate to the non-believers how important soil biodiversity is and how powerful it is. So that's the first thing you're going to have in your kit. And then the next thing you're going to have is a series of pictures, and here they are. Next. One is a picture comparing a cross-section of soil to a cross-section here of skin. And you're going to show people how both in form and function, they really are similar. Both the layers and where the microbes exist and how they travel between the layers, and where the hairs are versus the grasses or plants, and the roots versus the pores. Next picture. And this is another picture you can show, which is a cross-section of soil and a cross-section of our gut, because there too, both in form and function, they're really, really similar, because nature, she's incredibly thrifty, and when she finds a good design, she just makes it over and over and over again. Next. And you can show them here. One of these is the vasculature in a human kidney, and the other one is the rhizosphere of a plant. How similar they are, both in form and in function. And finally, last one, on an electron microscope level, one of these is the villi of our intestines interacting with the microbes in our gut, and the other is the roots of a plant interacting with microbes in the field. They are really, really similar because, in fact, we really are soil. Thank you so much.
Dear Daphne, thank you very much for this presentation. I think it was very inspiring from all. I was reading the chat and many were really happy about it because, well, you saw that we see one angle on soil biodiversity, which is the most common applied to agriculture, but then you show us the human health side, which is, well, I think nowadays everybody appreciates it even more. So thanks a lot. I think it was very interesting to see that. I'm sure, well, the questions and congratulations are coming for both of you speakers. Thanks a lot. I hope we will have time for making 1 or 2 questions at the end. So without delay, because it's getting late, and I kindly ask all participants to bear with us. Maybe we need 15 more minutes at the maximum so that I hope you can still be connected. I will invite my colleague Monica Kobayashi, who will present the work on soil biodiversity from FAO side, because we were trying to understand where are we in terms of global soil biodiversity, the status and gaps and challenges. Monica, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Ronald. So, dear participants, thank you very much for joining us today, and happy Biodiversity Day. So today, I would like to invite you all to explore the biodiversity below ground. And during the presentation, I would like you to take care of some gaps and also solutions that we can find on nature to link human, and soil biodiversity. So where are we now? Since the establishment of the Convention on Biological Diversity, many decisions have been mentioning soil biodiversity. This year, we're closing the UN decade on biodiversity. During the decade, we have many milestones important for soil biodiversity. Starting with the establishment of the Global Soil Partnership. From there to now, that FAO is producing the report on soil biodiversity. So, as many people already mentioned, we have an amazing momentum to raise the profile of soil biodiversity. This year, the Global Soil Partnership has this Keep Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity campaign, so that you can go to the website and see all the events and also the contests that we have. Next year, we have the Global Soil Biodiversity Symposium. And also we have, even the coronavirus is starting to launch conversation around soil virus as well. So taking this opportunity, we can mainstream soil biodiversity in many global challenges. For the next decade, for example, we can contribute for the decade on ecosystem restoration. We can contribute for the post-2020 biodiversity framework, including the implementation of the new plan of action on soil biodiversity. And of course, all this to accelerate and achieve the all sustainable development goals. This was a paper published last year, and I want to show you that during the last 2 decades, it was
Monica,
yes.
Excuse me, Monica, did you forget the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, or
You cannot see?
you need support? No, we didn't see the presentation.
Oh, sorry.
Try to share your screen, please.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But we accompanied very well. It was very well explained.
Oh, sorry. Can you see?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe, Isabel, if you have the presentation, you can share, or
Can you see?
Okay. Now it's fine.
Now it's okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I will pass very quick. Okay, so happy Biodiversity Day again. And then this is the milestones that we had during this decade. And then this is the global momentum that we have to mainstream soil biodiversity and achieve all these goals. And this is the graphic. So here we can see the explosion of soil biodiversity research in the last 2 decades. And as being mentioned in Daphne also, the interest also changed, because before was more about organism itself. And now we're talking about studying communities and all those topics. So all these number of papers and scientists working on this issue helped us to have the best knowledge on soil biodiversity available. And we worked together with people around the world, and it was a pleasure to really have this support from many excellent scientists to put together all this information and prepare the report that will be launched in this December during the World Soil Day. So the report, we of course talk about organisms, but how they interact between different organisms, what functions each one has. And also, Vin mentioned the global distribution. This is something very new. Last year, we had a change of paradigm that was really important for the soil biodiversity community. 2 papers, for the first time, they map globally nematode distribution and earthworms. So this global distribution showed us that, different from what we thought before, we thought that above ground biodiversity and below ground biodiversity goes together, shaped by climate. So in the world, we thought that going to the poles you have a reduction of biodiversity. But for some soil organisms, it depends. It could be the opposite, as we already mentioned. So this is a very important find that we have in this change completely the perception on soil biodiversity, and also call attention for all policymakers that soil biodiversity is different from above ground biodiversity in terms of distribution. So we have to take care of it. These are some campaigns that we did. So did you know that 25% of soil biodiversity is in soil, and 70% of wild bees, they nest in soils? But unfortunately, we only know 1% of the soil microorganisms. So a lot of work ahead. The main message from the report, I tried to organize in practical application, status and threats, and response. So we already know that soil biodiversity is a nature-based solution. In fact, these organisms are sustaining life in this planet. And then we not treating them very well. We have many drivers of loss. For example, deforestation is a major problem. And it depends on which ecosystem we're talking about. We have different responses. For example, in the Amazon forest, some studies show that after deforestation, to prepare the soil, sometimes there's a lot of products to neutralize the pH or change the pH. And this has a very hard impact on the local soil biodiversity. Another example from the Amazon is after the deforestation, the grazing in the livestock also can change the soil biodiversity organisms. In some studies, invasive species of the earthworm totally decrease the other organisms. And then these make homogeneous on the species that we cause other problems such as soil formation issues, soil structure issues, and then we're growing the problems in soil. So invasive alien species are arriving from different ways, different forms, from big animals, big mammals, to very small microorganisms. In the invasive alien species, they disturb the environment. And this disturbance can cause the imbalance. And when the system is lacking of balance, we can have responses like pests and pathogens to crops and also for forests. So this could be translated, one example, in soil-borne disease like the banana fusarium that causes problems all around the world. Practice, we have some example for agriculture that was already mentioned, like tillage, misuse of pesticide, fertilizers, AMR, resistance of antimicrobial. Also, we have monoculture. On top of that, all kinds of pollutions are causing problems. Soil sealing, cutting the access for air and water for the biodiversity. And also fires. Fires also are related to the biome. So some biomes are completely resistant to fire. Others, the organism, they're so resilient that they're building tunnels to protect themselves. But there are some ecosystems that they don't resist. And then some cases, depends on the frequency of fires, they will never be restored. So what can we do to change this? We can raise awareness on the importance of soil biodiversity. We can build greener cities. We can implement policies, sustainable soil management, reduce pollutants. We can do many things that it's like each stakeholder has possibilities to contribute. Potentialities. How can we use soil biodiversity, genetic resources? Food industry, agricultural industry, human health, and pharmaceutical industry, soil ecosystem restoration, and also bioremediation. Cheese, soy sauce, yogurt are examples of food that using soil bacteria to be produced. So we have yeast, we have many possibilities to use soil biodiversity to produce other kinds of food. Also, agriculture are benefiting from many technologies. For example, metagenomics, artificial intelligence, remote sensing, DNA sequencing, microbiome-based precision agriculture. All these, now we have technology open the black box of soil biodiversity. So now we can understand how those organisms work together and then help agriculture to be in real time, and maybe in the future they can know what is going on the field, how the crop is growing, about pests, and then all this technology can be combined with traditional knowledge, with traditional techniques to have a more sustainable agriculture. Human health. Since the beginning, human beings are using soil biodiversity to treat their health. Nowadays, we have many examples of antibiotics, drugs, vaccines. So we need to treat our soils well, because many of those organisms can be solution for other pathogens in other diseases that we could get. Ecosystem restoration, soil inoculation can be used to accelerate the process. Vin just explained, I don't need to say more, but also we have soil organisms dealing with pollution, helping air pollution decrease, filter water, and also degrading pollution in soils. So what kind of gaps? Knowledge gap, policy development, there are many gaps remaining. Some examples is assessment of soil biodiversity at national and global level, risk assessment of pesticides on non-target soil organisms, bioproducts. Sometimes the products, biofertilizers, biopesticides, doesn't have the response expected in the field, because sometimes the local community compete with them. So we need to understand how this works and how this industry can offer better solutions. Policy development. Now we understand more than ever that protecting the above ground biodiversity doesn't mean protection of soil biodiversity. It's not sufficient. We need a tailored protection, conservation, and restoration measures. Lack of knowledge, lack of capacity, and lack of resources are some of the countries' points that they need this to implement better soil biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. So some policy recommendations that come from the report is much more, just to give a flavor. So soil biodiversity needs to be reflected in the National Biodiversity Strategic Planning. Sustainable soil management, remediation, ecosystem restoration that considers soil health, biological indicators, standards and protocols to monitor. We need intersectoral collaboration, and then we need urban planning that takes in consideration soil health. So I hope you were able to identify the gaps and also to see how soil biodiversity and human beings are linked. And then together, I'm sure that we can build a more sustainable world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. was good, and I'm sure people will see because, well, we have been working on the global assessment on soil biodiversity, not us, but a big community of soil biodiversity scientists who made an effort and contributions. The report will be out towards the end of this year, and surely you will have access to. But the most important thing, I think, from this webinar and all this process is that we would like to keep this network of people working towards soil biodiversity, and we understood there is a lot of work to do. So there are many initiatives going on. We are trying to facilitate this, but also there is the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative, etc. So people are really invited to continue working with us. Now, I will launch 4 polls continuously before we go to the conclusions by Eduardo so that you have the chance to participate. We will start with the first one now. Do you agree that soil biodiversity loss caused by unsustainable human activities is one of the main soil threats? Okay, we have 75% of our participants who totally agree that yes, human activities, especially those that are unsustainable, are really contributing to the loss of soil biodiversity. And that's something that we really need to address. The next poll, please. In your country, we want to know who are the main actors addressing soil biodiversity. Is soil biodiversity only a topic built by researchers, the academia, or also the institutional or governmental institutions are really working on this field? This is very important for us, maybe also NGOs and maybe other actors, but we know that farmers deal every day with it, right? Those who manage the soil are dealing with soil biodiversity in one way or another, so they are very aware, but we want to understand the institutional attention to this topic because it's very important. Okay, we reached 75%, and we can see that together research institutions and academia have more than 60% of, let's say, they are really working on this field. The ministries and government a bit less, of course, NGOs, none, and I'm sure all. So this is giving us some indication in which how we need to try to advocate for more attention to this from the other institutions. Next poll, please. Is data, information about soil biodiversity available and regularly surveyed in your country? We want to know this because we talk a lot about evidence-based decisions, etc., but do you really have data and information about soil biodiversity available? As soil scientists and some surveyors, well, I remember that soil biodiversity is much focused in the survey papers. When the biological part comes is to count the number of ants or earthworms available, and that's all. So we want to understand if surveyors per se consider this soil biodiversity as an important field of data. Okay, 75% of people voted, and big majority, 80% says that no, we don't have data and information at national level. So this gives us clearly indication on where we need to also start in order to have more information and knowledge. finally, the last poll, please. Do you think there is a need for capacity development on soil biodiversity? All areas, not only in trying to understand and make assessments, but also to understand all what Wim and Daphne said about the interactions, networking insight with other species, the ecosystem, etc. Why we are asking you these questions? Because we want to take actions. It's not that we are organizing this event and this upcoming symposium just because we want to make an event. We want to contribute with actions, and that's why we are asking you this. And clearly, I think we reached 77% of respondents, so the majority is saying that yes, capacity development is much needed. So it means we need to work a lot in this area in order to provide training in the different aspects of soil biodiversity, and we should be happy that there are people like our keynote speakers who have big knowledge and they can share with us. Thanks for all these polls. I think they are very insightful for us. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Eduardo Mansour, who's the director of the Land and Water Division of FAO, to provide us the conclusions of our webinar, which has been longer than expected. And I have to thank that we have still more than 1,000 participants connected. So please, Eduardo, tell us what should be the take-home messages for all of us.
Thank you very much, Ronald. I mean, such a wonderful way to celebrate together the International Day for Biological Diversity. I think I learned a lot in this session. Not being a soil expert, I'm a forester by training, but we started with Madame Semedo showing us the importance, the crucial role of soil microorganisms. And Dr. Emad, Your Excellency, thank you very much for your insight on the need of mainstreaming biodiversity and the role that microbiodiversity has on this. David Cooper, our dear friend from the convention from CBD in Montreal, they need to know more about the microorganisms. And that's so evident today. And I have been discussing this, and this is an example. Look at the audience and the interest here. Wim, you made the point. Take two for tango. I think that's set the standard for the whole discussion, because what you do above ground influences below ground. It's not a question of having the number. It's a question of how you use it, how you use the soil, how the crop you have, how you manage it, and the impact that it has. So the above ground biodiversity and its interrelation with the below ground biodiversity was very, very important for me. And the challenge remains, we need to produce more food. If we intensify, we need sustainable intensification. So we have to look at this. So thank you very much for this. Definitely you open a whole new door for all of us. When you look from the food and agriculture perspective, and you brought so many solid information, the need to care for biodiversity under our feet, for the relationship with health, which is very timely, for the opportunity to have edible crops and use them and make, what is it, $24 per pound? I mean, for more wheat. I mean, so illustrative. Okay, I don't understand why underwear. Why you have to put you cannot put your handkerchief. That's in the same way. But putting that apart, it's fantastic to see putting science in a language that even I can understand. So very, very nice. Very, very illustrative in showing the importance of maintaining this soil biodiversity and the great opportunity that we have for learning from science. I think Monica talked to us about the report. She gave the set of what we do in FAO. Thank you so much. And you gave just an appetizer what the Soil Biodiversity Assessment Report that will be disclosed on the International Soil Day, 5 December this year, will be about. We cannot manage what we don't know, what we can't compare. And we know now that 25% of the living things are under our feet, so we have to look at it and the interactions that came about. I think it was, I'm overwhelmed with the information and I would like to see more diversity in the language here because we are limited with English. And I was reading the chat And it's amazing the amount of questions that come, the comments, the interchange. And some of these questions are going to be answered by the participants themselves, because it requires further study and it requires further research. We saw in the poll, Ronald, come on, if a poll 99% of the response, you knew it already. So we have to work more on capacity building, including from our own in terms of soil biodiversity. This is my take-home message. I mean, it's a wonderful start and a wonderful way of celebrating the International Day for Biological Diversity. I thank you very much for giving me the chance to comment on this.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I think you made an excellent summary of the main points that were brought today by the different speakers. Yes, definitely, that question was, we knew the answer, but you know why? Because after the assessment, we realized that, yes, we need to do a lot on capacity development and soil biodiversity beyond the usual issue of rhizobium, which is the most soil biodiversity activity that has been investigated for the last years. So that was a bit biased, it's true. Now, before closing, I wanted to invite you, especially those who want to still want to spend 4 more minutes. As you know, we were organizing the Global Symposium on Soil Biodiversity, and we prepared a video for that. So the video is there, it's waiting for its time to the symposium, but we thought that having this huge amount of people, it will be good to have as a sort of teaser for those who participated. So before closing, we will display this video for you so that you can have a sort of summary of the main things that you have seen today. So I thank you very much again to all the panelists, to all the colleagues who participated, the participants, and we kindly ask you to stay tuned because we have a global campaign towards the World Soil Day that is Keep Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity, and we hope you will join us next year in the symposium. And now, after having this experience, we will see if we organize other webinars addressing the questions that many of you have raised. So thanks again, and I hope you will enjoy this video.
That distant and small spot in the cosmos is the habitat of approximately more than 2 million species and the product of billions of years of evolution. Most of this biodiversity is in the soil beneath our feet, but only 1% of soil species have been identified so far. The soil biota constitutes the greatest concentration of biomas of any part of the planet and is composed of an immeasurable amount of mega, macro, meso, and microorganisms. Each of these wonderful creatures plays a key role in the food chain that maintains the fragile balance of life in natural and agro-ecosystems. If these complex interactions become interrupted, it can cause irreversible impacts for life on Earth, including humans. So, why do we need soil biodiversity? Soils hold many unexpected secrets and perform unseen functions. The discovery of antibiotics has had a major impact on increasing human life expectancy. Soils hold many other potential medicinal functions and possible cures. The natural association between plant roots and microscopic fungi promotes better plant nutrition and growth, tolerance to soil pathogens, and adverse climatic conditions. Through their natural function and metabolism, soil microorganisms are capable of breaking down and denaturing certain toxic compounds and contaminants resulting from many human activities. Part of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, derived from industry and agriculture, can be absorbed by plants and stored in soils thanks to microbial decomposition that may allow soil carbon retention for long periods of time. This invaluable service provided by soil organisms is key in climate change mitigation. On the other hand, deforestation, monocultures, and the overuse and misuse of agrochemical inputs degrade and reduce soil's health, diminish resistance to pests and pathogens, and cause biodiversity loss that jeopardize the delicate balance that took billions of years to evolve and specialize. We could not only lose a long natural history of specialization, evolution, and adaptation, but also soil's capacity to perform essential ecosystem functions. How can we restore, manage, and conserve something that we do not see directly, and of which we do not have full knowledge? It is our collective responsibility to raise awareness on the importance of soil biodiversity, promote technological innovation to preserve and enhance soil biodiversity, including ecosystem restoration, recognize soil biodiversity as a key provider of ecosystem services, and as one of the main nature-based solutions to face all the current global challenges. Invest in gathering better knowledge about the status of soil biodiversity and functions, including by region and land cover type. And develop policies based on scientific evidence to mainstream sustainable soil management and conservation of rich biodiversity soils across landscapes. Everything that we eat and drink passes through the soil biota over and over again. Therefore, we need healthy soils for healthy food, healthy environments, healthy people, and a healthy life. It starts with you. Give a voice to the sound of a living soil. Keep soil alive. Protect soil biodiversity.
Thank you very much again. I hope you like it. And well, this is the end of the webinar, and we wish you all the best and nice weekend to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.